install air conditioning, but instead of on a car, for your home. And instead of a whole system for your house or a big system, this is one of the smallest systems. This is one of the smallest higher end, high quality systems, not a cheap low end one. There's a big difference on energy usage between the really cheap ones and the higher end ones. Some of the cheaper ones say they're energy efficient, say they're certified 5-star energy efficiency rating, but they're not. So what we have here is the LG, and this is an inverter system, and every manufacturer makes different tier levels of their cheapest ones, their middle grade ones, and sometimes their higher end grade ones. This is one of the high efficiency ones, and this would be, if you went to the website, you go let's get back there. It's a little slow, but I'm going to show you the inner workings of this and how easy it is to maintain and clean. So if you were on the LG website, here's where you pick from their high efficiency models. If you want some nicer looking head units than this one, this is not LG, this is a Panasonic unit. These are actually too noisy to mount on a house of a wooden structure or a deck connected to someone's, because they make too much vibration and too noisy. These are quiet and smooth. So you just go pick what style you would want. They have some fancy ones. They even have ones that look like an option to put a tapestry and a picture inside one, and actually blows the air out the sides and up below, above and below, instead of straight forward, so nobody knows you have an air conditioning unit hanging on a wall because it looks like a picture. But that's enough with that. Let's get this out of the way. So maintenance wise, and the difference, let's see, screws out, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws out. Take off the top. If you want to know the model number, this is the model number. And take off, this is where your pipes come out of. They made it real simple. One screw, take that screw off, and off it comes. One screw. Really simple. How much simpler than you can get than that? Take off the side. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Take off those screws. And how much simpler can you get than that? If I don't drop my phone, let me put my phone down. Let's not make a mess. And how simple is that? Take off the front. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You already took off the top, so take off the side. Oh, wait a minute. Let's forget the side. Take off the grill. How easy do you think they made it that? One screw. Take off the one center screw there. Turn it a little bit, and out comes your fan. How easy is that? Is that rough? Take off. See if I could do this. Take off the front. Now the whole front is off. Let's lay that over here. Oh, and if you're wondering why else I'm taking this apart, this is going on a white roof, so all this is going to get painted bright white. Everything is going to be white. Even the plastic grill is going to be white, and even the fan is going to get brushed really fine, even coat, so it doesn't get unbalanced of white paint. So when looking at this, it's all going to be bright white, the same color as the roof, and the wall and the roof behind it, up on top of a house, everything's going to be white. So this is getting a custom paint job. So, and then back here you have the grill, which is your little guard on here, and that comes off like that. And that is it there. Very easy. 1, 2, that was when you took your top off. So that was already off. So additional 1, 2, 3. 3 screws and it's off. How difficult is that? Get off. And there it goes. So all these panels are going to get painted white. So and it's in San Francisco. We have a little salt air in our air when it's blowing from the ocean. Even when you're 5 miles inland, there's still salt. That makes it all the way inland. So having the extra layer of paint will be a good thing for that. I'm going to be treating this brand new coil, even though it has the gold fin technology on it. This is getting a coil epoxy coating on it. So I'll take this down, I'll clean it, make sure there's no oil residue on it. I'll let it dry out for a day or two. And then from the inside out and all the way around, all the way down at the bottom, everything is going to be epoxy coated. Even the metal, the sides, any of the hardware in here, see, everything will get epoxy on it. Even all the copper out here, this will all get coated with epoxy. So the salt air help extend the life of it. All this bright shiny copper here will not be exposed to the atmosphere, so it won't oxidize because it'll be encased in epoxy. And our electronics, if you ever had to do any, if you ever taken, I've unfortunately have, oh god, some of the worst, the older like Panasonics like this, or old Fujitsu or something like that, and you had to take out that circuit board and you did your first one and it took you several hours to do it because it was your first one. What a nightmare that was. Look at how easy this is. Everything comes about just 1, 2, 3, 4 out of there. Everything is out of there really easy. It has a nice shiny conformal coating on it. It has an evenly protected coating. If you've ever seen circuit boards, and if they're going to be in harsh environments or something like that, and you have condensation and you have humidity, whatever the thing, you get some of those cheap circuit boards and you ever notice it's shiny in some spots and then there's some spots open. It looks like, you know, the guy putting it together just like painted it on and swashed it in there really fast because he was in a hurry, and some of the circuit board isn't coated. This thing is nice and evenly coated with its conformal coating all over the place, protecting the circuit board. That was great. Another thing they did, quiet. This is something that years ago, this was an extra you would have to pay for. Now this is one of the smallest 9,000 BTU units. Look at this sound insulation pad. This thing just has sound deadening and sound insulation all around it, all around the top, all the sides, 360 degrees around. The whole floor is covered in sound deadening insulation. They went out of their way to make sure this thing was really quiet. And that's one of the advantages of this. Oh, cars. Let's talk about heat pumps. The Prius Prime. Prius Prime has a heat pump in it. And if you've seen one of my videos that I made a couple days ago on the Prius Prime, what they had to do to put a heat pump in a car, they just messed it up. I mean, they put so many unnecessary components that weren't really necessary. I mean, to come up with this simple little reversing valve right here, some guys might call it three-way valve. Let's see if I could zero in on that. I wonder if I could get this out of there easily. Oh no, that's stapled. Sorry about that. But this is a three-way valve. If you look back at my Prius Prime video, you'll see all the solenoids they used to do the same purpose that this one little tiny valve with one solenoid does. They have like 3 or 4 solenoids, an extra expansion. I mean, they just went retarded complicated on that system. It's gonna cost a lot of money to repair. They could have done something really simple like this. Of course, they can't use copper or brass on a car because copper and brass doesn't like vibrations, but stainless steel works good. So this is your inverter driven compressor. So you'll see these really cheap ads for the cheapest units that you can get. Not all of them are inverter driven, and not all of them are energy efficient. Even if they are inverter driven, they might be better than the older ones, but there's a lot of these units out there that have a single speed direct drive compressor, and they literally use as much as a larger old-fashioned American style unit, the big square ones, the regular split systems that had a 3 or 4, a little 2-ton can use as much as a 3 or 4 ton in power wattage as a newer system today. They're very inefficient, but what they do is they put them in one of these small cases and they make them look like an inverter system, and they sell them online as energy efficient and something new technology and stuff like that. But when you open them up, or you put your amp meter and you put your watt meter on them, you find out that they're actually energy hogs, but they're being sold as energy efficient because they're in that little small pancake style case that everybody associates with energy efficient, but some of the systems actually are not. What else can I say about this one here? Oh, so it all comes down to physics. When it comes down to energy efficiency, 1 pound of refrigerant, like 1 pound of water or 1 pound of gasoline, only has so much, like gasoline only contains so much power in 1 pound of gasoline. If you remember, if any of you took auto class or knew a little bit of physics, you always wondered why diesels could carry more, or like the little Volkswagen Golf that was a diesel used to get almost 60 miles to the gallon, but had pretty good power too. This was way before Dieselgate, and that was the deal because diesel has, for 1 pound of weight of diesel, has much more energy and power capacity than 1 pound of gasoline. Same here, we're going to get into physics of refrigerant. To get that 1 ton of cooling, 24,000 BTUs, when they're talking about 1 ton, it was an old way of saying 1 ton of ice melting over a certain amount of period would give you 12,000 BTUs of cooling. Well, you have to move 1 pound of refrigerant through all these coils, and you know, when you blow water through a straw or through a garden hose, a short garden hose, only say you had 5 feet of garden hose, and you want to blow water through a garden hose, it comes out a little bit, pretty good, right? And it wasn't that difficult to blow a garden hose that's only 5 feet long. But now get a 50-foot long length of garden hose and try to blow a 50-foot length of garden hose and blow that same hard pressure that you could do with your lips and your cheeks and blow water through a 50-foot garden hose. You'll notice it takes a lot more power, especially when they're smaller. You know, you have a lot of restriction and bends and kinks. Well, you'll notice that this 9000 and some of the other high efficiency 9000s are much bigger and heavier than the cheap 9,000 or 12,000 BTU units sold on the internet. And if you look at them, you'll see the weight is only about somewhere around 39, 40 some pounds for, say, a 9,000 or 12,000 BTU. This little one here is 74 pounds. I mean, look at the size of my hand and look how small this thing is. I mean, this thing, basically if I put my arm down here, it comes up to my arm right about there to about there. It's really small, and you actually can look this up on LG's website, but it weighs 74 pounds. So on some of the cheap air conditioning units you buy that say their energy efficiency, they may have a condenser that's only about this high, so they cheat you out of more cooling passages and tubes. They cheat you out of cooling fins. They may only be 1 core. So if you look here, you have 2 rows of refrigerant passages. Well, on some of the cheaper ones, they only have one. But you're a consumer, and all you know is it's cheap. And when you look at it from the outside, you just see these fins out here. The common person who's a consumer doesn't know that there could be a second row back here. And some of the cheap ones won't have that second row. The consumer who's buying one of these for a good deal, he goes, that's cheap. And that's because he doesn't have a DC inverter motor inside here that's really energy efficient and that can spin really slow, because if that's all it needs, when it dials down and it has satisfied cooling inside the house and it just needs to maintain, it'll just idle and spin really slow and consume very little wattage, very little power consumption. Same goes for the compressor. And because the fan has a special pitch to it, at a very slow rotating speed, it could move a lot of air and not consume power, a lot of power. And because of the large coil, that 1 pounder refrigerant and many pounds can easily pass through all this coil very easily with all these tubes and fins. Compared, it would be easier to push 10 pounds of fluid or liquid through this many rows of tubing to get the same cooling if you had tubing that was only a condenser this high and only one row. You still have to push 10 pounds of refrigerant through fewer tubes at the same speed. That means if you were pushing 10 pounds of a liquid through fewer tubes, but you still had to get it out the other end just as fast as you would if you added 20 more tubes, you have to use a lot more energy to push through. So because they're cheaper, they cut you out of cooling capacity with copper and aluminum cost money, profits. So if you could sell the same item and claim it does the same thing, but give somebody less, you just have to make the pump work harder and use more energy to push the same weight of refrigerant through the same amount of coils, and have a fan that needs to spin a little bit more and consume more power through a smaller restrictive condenser, consuming more power. But it'll still do the same work, but it was cheaper. So that's one of the differences between a real cheap internet heat pump and one of the higher end heat pumps. Take them apart, compare them. After you've been out on the field and you've taken apart many different ones, and you go onto a website, if you go on to anybody's website, whether it's Mitsubishi, Daikon, LG, Fujitsu, Panasonic, and you look up their components and you look at a BTU side, whether it's 12,000 BTUs 1 ton, or it's 36,000 BTUs or 60,000 BTUs 5 ton. Look up their cheapest models and look at the specs. Look at how many square inches of coil face they say they have. You'll notice the cheaper ones have smaller coils than the more expensive ones, but they might both say 5 tons. And then you will notice that on the cheap 5 ton unit on the condenser, it might have a regular old PCS motor, which is very energy inefficient. And on the newer high energy efficient system, they'll have an ECM motor that is very energy efficient. And the cheap motor will have 1 speed fan. It only knows how to kick in full throttle right away, consume a lot of energy to get that fan spinning at say 1175 RPMs, and it sounds like a helicopter taking off in the backyard, compared to one that's a DC ECM inverted driven motor that starts out really slow like this with no torque and no power and almost no energy consumption, and it just slowly spins itself up without consuming a lot of power and gets there very quietly, and it only spins fast enough by the sensors that are reading the pressures and temperatures in the system to make it efficient, and then it won't go no faster. And that's how they stay quiet and energy efficient. Same goes for the motors, and the same goes for the indoor head units too, which I'll take apart one of those that is for this. later on in a further video. So this is a heater coil for the heat pump. So when you're in winter time and you're making hot air for the inside, the outside becomes your evaporator, what becomes cold. So this will start actually icing up on cold days. And if it's cold and rainy or really cold and there's some humidity outside, these coils will actually start to ice up and fill with ice. And ice is not a good conductor of heat or cold. It's an insulator and it blocks air. So what they'll do is it'll go through thaw cycles every now and then so it doesn't ice up. But the water that comes down here outside in the middle of winter, it could be snowing outside. If the water comes down here and outside is below 32 degrees, you would turn into a pile of ice up here and start icing up, and you can actually expand ice inside your coils and cause damage. But you would ice up back here. So what they do is they put this heater down here. And if you see, the heater is down in the lowest part in this little trough that looks like a little river, like it's a little cutout. So as the water pours down, it just heats it enough above freezing so the water from condensation on here during the winter time as you're heating inside the house pours down and doesn't turn into a brick of ice that just keeps building up out here. And that's what that is. I'm here in San Francisco. We never get that cold, so this will never even come into use. It's totally not needed in San Francisco. But that's this little unit here. And it'll be a later video that you'll see this on top of a roof in the house in San Francisco. And this is an ideal situation for one room or for like a hallway, and you leave some doors open and the hot air flows into the hallways, or cool air. Somebody who always thinks they need a whole house system and it's just $10,000, $15,000, $25,000. It's just like way out of their range, and either their old system is broken down or they just can't afford to add air conditioning to a furnace, or they don't want to heat a whole house because they only stay in maybe a kitchen in the front living room, and their furnace, when they turn it on, has to heat up 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, you know, maybe a play area and something like that, another 3,000 square foot of a home, when the person who occupies the house is only in the kitchen and front room. You could have something like this and only pay the amount of money and energy consumption of what this can do for that little tiny part of the house, instead of heating up a whole house when you're only staying in one room. That's another advantage of a small system like this. They last 15, 20, 30 years with maintenance and proper installation. I've rarely see any of them ever last that long if they weren't properly installed or properly maintained. Forget it. None of the systems, they all break down with lack of maintenance or improper installation. I think that's it for this video, and the next time you see this little system, it will be white and ready to go up on a roof. And that's it, guys. And go to LG's website and look up something like this. It's a good alternative instead of doing a whole house. And as for energy efficiency, it is a lot more, these units are a lot more efficient and use less energy than some of those, let's say, those commercials you see on TV, you hear on the radio, and you see on YouTube about those so-called energy efficient. For the same size system, this is a lot more energy efficient. That I can guarantee you, because I always put an amp clamp and I do the watt meter draw on all the systems I work on, and a system like this saves you more energy. That's it. See you guys later.